I'm very happy to have received this invitation to offer some reflections today in various parts of the world that everyone are gathered in Thailand, Malaysia, India, in Europe, in UK, in USA, or wherever you might be. I'll begin in our traditional fashion of paying respects to the Buddha and the Triple Gem. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. I see from the little counter at the bottom of my screen that it says 500, so that suggests to me there's people with a big variety of different levels of experience, familiarity with Buddhist teachings, but I will assume that the kind of people that have joined in with this event, have signed up for this event, will have a degree of say knowledge or familiarity with basic Buddhist ideas, Buddhist language, but there'll be a period of time for questions and responses afterwards. So if anything that I say is not clear or the terminology needs to be explained, then people can ask questions at that time. So I first of all express my my gratitude to Yom Bui and Yom Pung to have brought this event together, and I hope that what I offer this afternoon will be useful for them and for all of you who have gathered together today. I was interested to see the title, the theme being "Suffering is the way out of suffering," and so that is something that is a principle that is very close to the heart of my own practice, my own training, the community that I have grown up in terms of Dhamma life. So I felt it was a very suitable area to explore, and particularly because of the pandemic, the increasing levels of sickness, difficulty, and the kind of struggles that we are experiencing as a human community, particularly on account of the pandemic, but also all of the other effects that come from that in this present time, the economic difficulties, social difficulties, as well as just the disease of the body or the death of loved ones, or being in a position of having to take care of those who are sick and dying. So I feel this is a particularly significant, helpful topic to look at this current time. So looking at this theme, considering this is a very common statement in the forest tradition, at least as it is practiced in Thailand. The way of life in the forest monasteries is quite rugged, quite austere. It's deliberately challenging. So you have a minimum of comforts, a minimum of possessions, a strict adherence to the Vinaya discipline, and a rigorous routine, so that different monasteries run things in different ways. But my own background in Thailand, at the International Forest Monastery and Ajahn Amaro Monastery, Wat Nong Papong and its branches, that's very much a theme of the way of life there. You know, nowadays there's running water and electricity in many of the branches, but many of the places that I have lived, often a little kuti, a little hut in the forest, no electricity, no running water, the toilet is a hole in the ground, and you live with the extremes of heat and cold, and being, say, subject to the, the variations of weather according to the different times of year, the different seasons. So one of the phrases that I would hear very often in those early days in Thailand would, when meeting those kind of difficulties, being really hot and sweaty in the hot season, or in the rainy season, everything being very humid, very damp. You'd wash your robes and they'd still be damp 2 or 3 days later. You hang them on the line or out in the air, and the air is so damp and there's so much moisture that nothing would ever get dry, and there's mold everywhere in your and the kind of stickiness that many of you are living in the hot tropical countries will be very familiar with. India and Southeast Asia, and also in the United States. When I lived in California, it was not uncommon for a day this time of the year, June or July, the temperature could easily be 30, 35, 40, 45 degrees Celsius. It's a hot a hot experience living with the human body, that sense of sweating and finding no cool place to be. Living in the rigorous conditions of the forest monastery, we would have a practice of eating just one meal a day. We'd walk out on the alms round early in the morning, have one meal a day, say at about 8:30 in Wat Pa Nanachat, the international monastery, and then that's your food for the day. Personally, I maintain that practice here at Amaravati for myself during at least during the hot half of the hotter half of the year. So from sort of May through to October, I just have the one meal. It's later in the day at 11:30 here, so that you're experiencing that the qualities of hunger, filling the body with some food, receiving your nourishment, and then that's it for the rest of the day. You might have a cup of tea or a coffee or other things in terms of tonics, but food is just one time a day. So these kind of austerities and living strictly according to the Vinaya rule, this brings a limitation, and there's a frustration to our habits of looking for comfort, looking for, say, being able to arrange the world around us according to our preferences in terms of our clothing, our shelter, eating, eating food, and so on. And so that there was a lot of difficulty and say frustration could be experienced in dealing with those extremes of weather and comfort, and hunger, and so on and so forth. And the phrase that would be used very, very often is, "This is the suffering that leads to the end of suffering." That's in a way, the standard version of the title of this talk. Suffering is the way out of suffering is the talk's title. But in the Thai forest tradition, they would frequently say, this is the suffering that leads to the end of suffering. Because you might think, well, if the Buddha's teaching is all about ending suffering, why do we only eat once a day? Or why do we only have a thin grass mat to lie down on to sleep? Why don't we have a mattress? Or why don't we have air conditioning in the kutis and so on? And so that it was said over and over and over again, this is the suffering that leads to the end of suffering, the dukkha that leads to the end of dukkha. So this, I feel, is the most helpful say angle of approach that I to say understand. And if we can get a feeling for how this works, then this makes an enormous difference in our life. We're not looking to end suffering just by being more comfortable or by having everything go the way that we like, or trying to control everything in our world, in our family, and in the workplace. But rather, we see that the ending of suffering comes from attitude. Everything hinges around our attitude. So one of the teachings that this principle is based on, that the suffering that leads to the end of suffering, is in a short discourse that the Buddha gives in the Anguttara Nikaya. If you're interested, it's in it's sutta number 63 in the Book of the Sixes. Anguttara, the numerical discourses, Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Sixes, sutta number 63. And there he says that dukkha, suffering, ripens in two ways. Either more dukkha, or it ripens in search. It's either one of those two. So more dukkha means when we are uncomfortable or somebody insults us, then we look for a comfortable place. We turn the air, we're too hot, so we turn the air conditioning on. Or somebody insults us, so we argue with them, or we take them off our contact list. We kind of unfriend them and move away from them. We get irritated and upset. We complain about them. So that complaining, that getting upset, that leads to more suffering. If we turn the air conditioning on, yes, it keeps us cool for a while, but then there's a power cut. And then when there's no power, then the air conditioning stops, and then we are hot and we've got no way to get cool. So suffering that leads, these are just ordinary everyday examples that I'm using. So that suffering ripens in that way of more suffering. That's the heart is locked onto the what we call the bhava chakra, the wheel of becoming. And so dukkha is not liberating at all. It's not suffering being the way out of suffering at all. It's suffering leading to more suffering. That's if there is ignorance, not seeing things clearly, if there is avijja. So if, however, we take the other track, track number 2 is search. The Buddha says suffering can ripen in search. So what that means when he explains it, he says, what this is to say is that there must be some alternative to this. There is the intuitive wisdom, that that understanding in the heart that recognizes this can't be the whole story. This can't be the only possibility. There's got to be a way to work with this. There has to be a way that the mind can relate to this without making a problem out of it. So that, and so then the search is, so what is the way? What is the attitude? How do I find that pathway forward? So that quality of search or searching, it represents a faith, a saddha, that this experience of suffering, be it me being annoyed with you, or me being too hot because of the like say right now in England, this is it's our midsummer, so this is a warm summer day here in England, not baking hot, but it's warm enough to not have a jacket on, so I can bare my skin to the weather without freezing. But that quality of search that I'm talking about, it's saying there has to be a way that the mind can get a perspective on this discomfort, or this me feeling upset with this person next door, or me feeling regretful or self-hatred because I've said something untrue, or I've acted in a way that was hurtful to someone. So that faith is recognized, is a recognition that there has to be a way this experience can be known, can be held, that is free of dukkha, that is free of that quality of tension and stress and difficulty. So what is the way? So that's the search, is that you're contacting the quality of intuitive wisdom, the sati panya, the mindfulness and wisdom of the heart, and that faith then ripens because it begins to take shape in the mind. There has to be a way out, and that faith recognizes, yes, this suffering, this painful feeling, this irritation, this anxiety, this regret, it can't possibly be the whole story. So that in that moment, the view is changing from a self-centered point of view to a point of view centered on dhamma. It's a nature-centered point of view, or a dharma-centered point of view, rather than a self-centered point of view. There's an attitude shifting, so that even though there's this feeling of irritation arises and passes away. It's an aspect of nature. This feeling of regret, it arises, it passes away. It's an aspect of nature. How could it be absolutely who and what I am? Aha. So that quality of aha, that's representing the saddha, the faith. There has to be a way forward. Now, that recognition, or that intuitive sense, then leads to a quality called pamuja, which means a delight, or a sense of say, relief Yes, that's right. It's an awakening joy, or an awakening, say, sense that there definitely is a way forward. So the heart opens to Dhamma and starts to see things in from a broader viewpoint. Then that pamuja, that leads to rapture, or to joy, to piti, and then that leads to contentment or happiness, sukha. There's like a ripening of that quality, and then with that ripening, that sense of contentment and ease, there's a physical relaxation and a mental relaxation. There's a contentment that arises from that. This is all spelled out in a teaching that's called Proximate cause. The Buddha spells out how one thing leads to another, and he points out that dukkha can be the cause of faith. Then faith then leads on to delight. Delight leads on to joy. Joy leads on to calmness or passaddhi, and then it leads to contentment, sukha, and then that leads to samadhi. Then the samadhi leads on to insight, to what's called yatha bhutang jnana dasanam, the knowledge and vision of the way things are. And the image that the Buddha gives, he says, it's like when rain falls upon the mountain. The raindrops fall onto the mountain, and then they fall initially into little pools, and the pools form tiny streams. The tiny streams form bigger streams. The bigger streams form larger streams. They form into rivers, and they flow to the ocean. One thing leads to another, to another, to another. And so that's a beautiful image that we can all relate to. This is called the teaching on proximate cause. So if you're interested in the sutta, again, it's in the Connected Discourses, the Samyutta Nikaya, section 12, which is about causation, and it's sutta number 23 in the Samyutta, the Nidana Vagga, the discourses about causation, sutta 23. And so in this process, starting off with dukkha, then it leads to samadhi, then to insight, and that insight then leads to letting go, to dispassion, to coolness of heart, nibbida, a kind of a dispassion, a relaxation of attachment. As a letting go, nibbida leads to dispassion, to viraga, which leads then to liberation and the ending of the outflows, the ending of the asavas. So that starting with dukkha, then there's this natural flow, like the rain falling onto the mountain, forming into little pools and streams, and bigger streams flowing to the ocean. In our own hearts, in our own minds, when dukkha is handled in a skillful way, when we relate to dukkha in that wholesome way, then it leads to nibbana, it leads to peacefulness, it leads to liberation. So everything hinges upon attitude, once again. So in the forest tradition practice and the teaching of the Buddha, then he encourages us to notice dukkha. And for many people coming across Buddhism for the first time, that they think, okay, it's all about ending suffering. So if it's about ending suffering, why don't we make ourselves as comfortable as possible? Why don't we have as many possessions as possible? Why don't we control the world as much as possible to have everything that I like? And the Buddha's teaching is pointing to the fact that because that never works, you can't control the world. You can't get all the things that make you satisfied all of the time. That getting more things and having more apparent control doesn't lead to that same kind of liberation. In effect, for most of us, it leads to more stress, more burdens, and more disappointment, because no matter how much you try to make things comfortable and according to your wishes, to your preferences, then over and over again, things show themselves to be unownable, uncontrollable. The factors of our life, our family, our workplace, the world around us, they're not under personal control. They are anatta, they're not self. So instead, the Buddha's encouragement is to, rather than dealing with suffering by avoiding it, or trying to get away from it by fulfilling all of our desires, or just going numb, just by switching off, the Buddha encourages us to turn towards that dukkha, to say, open the heart to it and to know it, to meet it. So those of you who are familiar with the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, which is the core teaching of the Buddha in the very first discourse that he gave to his 5 companions shortly after the enlightenment in the deer park in Varanasi, then when explaining his understanding to his friends to help them to be liberated, he began by saying, idang dukkhang, this is dukkha. This is the experience of dissatisfaction. And that's based on the principle that, you know, if there is an ultimate reality, if there is a fundamental reality of dhamma, if there is the dharma, then why are we not totally happy all of the time? That's the kind of unspoken question in the Buddha's first teaching. If there is an ultimate reality, if the fundamental nature of who and what we are is perfect and complete reality, why are we not happy? Why are we not free? What's out of balance here? What's spoiling the picture? So he brings our attention to that experience of wrongness, or things being out of balance, or that lack of perfect happiness. So we experience dukkha. Why is that? Where is that coming from? If there is a dhamma, if there is the dharma, which is the fabric of reality, which is sort of perfect, pure, and of a transcendent nature, why are we not happy? Why are we not free? Why is there this sense of limitation or insecurity, frustration, conflict? So his advice is to turn towards that very experience of dukkha. And so in each of the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha gives an explanation of how they can be, each of those qualities can be related to, or should be related to bring about that freeing of the heart. So with the experience of suffering, he says, parinyeyanti, it is to be apprehended, it is to be understood, to be received. So it's like that teaching about search, that second way of looking at dukkha. It's like that ripening of dukkha in search. It's like, okay, here's the experience of dukkha. So it is to be understood, means that there's an exploring and examining and investigating that is going on. The mind is turning towards the experience rather than just blotting it out or trying to get away from it. Instead of saying, what is this? How is this working? Where's this coming from? So that curiosity, that capacity to investigate, to explore, that's the essence of this way of working with the first noble truth of dukkha. Parinyeyanti, it is to be apprehended, it's to be received, it's to be understood. So there's an opening of the heart. Here is the experience of dukkha. It's like this. And in a mysterious way, rather than that, when we turn towards dukkha and open the heart to it, rather than it making more suffering or making things more difficult, it's something that helps to support that quality of faith. By trying to evade suffering, getting away from it, or trying to just blot it out, that just increases the dukkha. It's only by turning towards it and opening the heart to it that mysteriously we find a way beyond it. So that how suffering is the way out of suffering is then by turning towards that experience of dukkha, then we can see where it's coming from. So it's seeing dukkha rather than wallowing in it, or creating a sense of self around it. So that apprehending dukkha or opening the heart to dukkha, it's not like, poor me, life is so unfair, when's this going to be over? That's not apprehending dukkha, that's wallowing in dukkha. That's getting lost in dukkha, getting born into it. So when we speak about this a skillful way of relating to the first noble truth, it's that sense of seeing and knowing, like, oh, this is an experience, this is a mental event. This experience of dissatisfaction, it has begun, it has a lifespan, and it ends. It's not a permanent thing. It's not absolute. It can't be. No thing is permanent. Sabbe sankhara anicca. All conditioned things are impermanent. aha. So at that moment, there's a separation. There's a lack, the habit of identifying and being the owner of the suffering, that's challenged, that's loosened. And then in that moment, that which knows the experience of dukkha is not locked onto it. It's the knowing of that painful feeling is separate from the feeling itself. There's a kind of a drawing apart, a separation, like Ajahn Chah would say, it's like oil separating out from water. If you have oil and water together in a bottle, if you shake them up, then it seems like one liquid. You put the bottle down, the oil and the water separate out. The knowing and the object of knowing naturally separate out. So this apprehending dukkha, that sense of dukkha, is to be understood, to be apprehended, to be known. That's that putting down of the bottle. And then that quality of awareness knows, this is dukkha, idang dukkha, here is dukkha. This is a mental event. It's a pattern of experience. That which knows that the feeling of dukkha is not tied to, is not identified with that dukkha. That which knows suffering is not suffering, in short. So then the fulfillment of that quality is then when dukkha has been understood, it has been apprehended. Parinyatanti is in each of the Four Noble Truths, there's the advice that the Buddha gives of how it should be handled, and then the fulfillment of that. So then in its fulfillment, in bringing that to a completion, then that dukkha has been fully known. Oh, this is just a feeling, it is just a perception, it's just a mental event. Aha. So the other members of the group of Four Noble Truths, they are the second noble truth is the truth that dukkha has a cause, which is craving, tanha, and then that craving is to be let go of, pahata banti. That's the advice the Buddha gives us to how to relate to that second noble truth. So where that feeling of incompleteness or insecurity, dissatisfaction, that wrongness has come from, it's from self-centered craving, tanha, different kinds of sense desire, or the desire to become, the desire to get rid of. And that is to be let, so that craving, that tanha, is to be let go of, pahata banti. When it's been let go of, pahinanti, then there's the kind of fulfillment of that way of working has been brought to its completion. That has been, say, actualized. So that letting go has happened. When that letting go happens, then that leads to the third noble truth, which is dukkha nirodha, the ending of dukkha. So when there is the recognition that the dukkhas come from clinging, there's a letting go of that clinging, then as the clinging stops, then the dukkha stops, dukkha nirodha. But then the Buddha says that ending of dukkha, that needs to be realized, that needs to be fully acknowledged, sachikata banti. And then when it has been fully realized, so that is the Pali for that is sachikatanti, that dukkha really has ended. This is the experience of the heart free of dukkha. This is the experience of nibbana, of peacefulness, of freedom. And then the fourth noble truth is describing that in a way how that quality of letting go is carried out, how that is brought into being and brought to completion in all the different areas of our life. So it's what we call the Eightfold path. The fourth noble truth is the path leading to that ending of dukkha, and that the Buddha says is to be developed, bhaveta banti. And when it has been developed, bhavitanti, has been brought to fulfillment. So, but going back to this way of, say, initially relating to dukkha, this is very much a part of our practice, what we call the Dutanga tradition, the forest tradition practice. The Buddha allowed a certain number of ascetic practices, what we call austere practices, to in a way sharpen the attention, to help it more possible, more easy to notice how dukkha works. And so he was one who had been trained, who had grown up in the ascetic tradition of yogis in India. So he knew about sort of self-torture and making life very uncomfortable for himself. So he allowed a few kind of practices to make things more challenging, but he didn't allow anything that was really physically harmful. So that you were not allowed to do things like make a vow to stand on one leg for 40 years, or to stop eating food altogether, to take on kind of self-destructive practices, or to be cutting off our limbs as some kind of sacrifice. The Buddha forbade that, said, no, this is not liberating. These are self-destructive, these are harmful, these are painful. But what he did allow, there was what he called the Dutanga practices, and Dutanga literally means a method of shaking something off. Like if you've got something, say I haven't got any sellotape here, but if you have something stuck to you that say this pen was stuck to my fingers, the Dutanga is a kind of a way of letting go of that, a way of shaking that off, of breaking that stickiness. So the Dutanga is that means of shaking something off, to let go of it. And so these practices are things like only eating one meal a day, eating all of your food from a single bowl, only eating the food that you're given on the alms round when you walk through the local town or the local village, only using the 3 postures of sitting, standing, and walking, never lying down, only having 3 robes to wear for all seasons, and no other clothing to cover the body, living out in the forest rather than living in a sheltered environment, living at the root of a tree, these kind of things. So our training in the forest tradition is out of this Dutanga, is around these Dutanga practices. So many of you have seen pictures of our monasteries, or pictures of Venerable Ajahn Chah or ourselves, sitting under a tree or walking with our alms bowls. So these are not just kind of spiritual symbols, but they're actually how you live. And the reason why these practices are useful is because they're aimed at, say, bringing attention to those very basic sort of reactive areas of mind around personal space, around comfort, around food, around sleep. And so they are ways of say, limiting or simplifying the way that you live in order to meet those kind of instinctual reactions around being hungry, around being comfortable, uncomfortable, around your own personal space, having things the way that you might like them. So that in terms of the suffering being the way out of suffering, not that I'm encouraging everyone to join forest monasteries, shave your heads and live under a tree. I wouldn't make that presumption, but I'm talking about these as a way of understanding how we literally deliberately make our life more challenging in order to understand how dukkha works so it can be transcended. That's the sort of methodology of the forest tradition, and why we use that kind of a phrase, this is the suffering that leads to the end of suffering. So that when you start, say, living in a monastery and you find out, like when I went to live at Wat Pananachart, I didn't realize that they didn't have any food after noon, or after 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. That was a discovery after I'd already arrived in the monastery. No supper, and the feelings of hunger that might be there in the evening, you can learn to work with that. There's plenty of food to eat in the morning, there's enough to live on, but that say taking on that simplification of eating kind of 1 time a day means you get to experience hunger, and you realize, oh, well, just because there's a feeling of hunger passing through doesn't mean I have to have some food immediately in order to be happy. Like right now, I just, in the summertime, I just eat 1 meal a day. The main meal here is not until 11:30, so it's quite common for me around 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning to feel a kind of sort of rumble in my stomach, and to notice that I'm feeling hungry. But if you notice that feeling, then it's only there for like a few seconds, maybe 10, 20 seconds at the most, then it's gone. And so then you're not hungry anymore. The food will be offered, as it is every day, by many of you good, generous people. But that that feeling on its own, this is the point of these Dutanga practices, that by not being able to gratify that immediately, you can recognize, oh, a wave of hunger arises, it's there for a while, then it's gone. And the interesting thing is that when that hungry feeling has passed, there is nothing missing in that moment. The universe is not incomplete, if you understand what I mean by that. It's like that hungry, when there's a feeling of hunger, it's like, oh, I want some food, and I'm lacking some food. If I had something to eat, that would be good. When that feeling is gone, you're not lacking anything in that moment. The universe is not incomplete in that moment. So then these Dutanga practices, they are what I like to think of, they're helping us to meet the reactions of the reptile brain. So in terms of how our neurophysiology works, there's kind of instinctual functions around food, sex, personal space, comfort, and sleep. These very, very basic instincts that come from having a body, being born, and to be able to say know and understand those compulsions. Like I'm not boasting, but just using it as an example. But I kept the practice of not lying down for about 3.5 years. So I didn't lie down for more than 3 years as a monk. You learn a lot about sleepiness if you take that kind of make that kind of a determination. And also you learn a lot about discomfort, because after a while there is no comfortable position to sit in. Everything aches most of the time, my experience. So I can see a few people nodding around the screen there. Again, I'm not boasting or showing off, I'm just using it as an example. But then you find, yeah, there is no comfortable posture. Even sitting in an armchair, things still ache. if you could find an armchair to sit in. And so but you realize just because the body's aching, the mind doesn't need to make a problem out of it. Just because you're feeling sleepy, and every period of group meditation is a real effort to stay upright and alert, you don't have to make any suffering out of that. So that's the point of these Dutanga practices, and why I wanted to speak about this as the suffering that, or as an upaya, a skillful means of how to understand how suffering leads out of suffering, is you're deliberately inviting a situation quite consciously, like, yes, I'm limiting my sleep, or I'm limiting my possessions, or I'm limiting my control over what is comfortable, what my living environment is like, so that I can experience some hunger or some sleepiness and discomfort, and by deliberately turning towards it, because there is that opening the heart to that uncomfortable feeling, like you've invited this, so you've made this resolution to just have one meal a day or to not have supper, therefore hunger. So having invited it, then that changes the dynamic. It's like if you send out an invitation for people to come and visit you and they show up, then you feel quite happy that they come. If you haven't sent out an invitation and then all kinds of people show up at your door, you might not be so happy. Some of them you'll be happy to see, others you think, what's he doing here? You're not always, but if you send out an invitation, then you're glad when those folks arrive. So the dynamic is changed. So when we've invited the feelings of sleepiness or discomfort, or being hot or being cold, being hungry, letting people into your personal space, if we've sent out the invitation, then there isn't any resentment or any kind of negativity that arises. Or if it does arise, then you know, aha, well, I made this resolution, and then now it's challenging my habits, the way that my mind tends to think, or that's my space, that's my stuff, or I want some for me. Like when my first rains retreat as a novice in Thailand, I made the vow just to live on the food that I was given in the village, and I was the last novice in the line, so we walk in order of seniority. And any of you who've been monastics or been engaged in this kind of practice in the past, you will understand, you'll be able to relate to this. So I'm about 8th or 9th in line, and you're walking along the sort of the dusty village street, and even though the layperson might be kneeling down about 50 meters away, you can count the number of bananas on the plate at 50 meters. And if you can see there's only 4 bananas and I'm number 8 in the line, it's like, I'm not going to get a banana, because that means that's not going to go into your bowl, so that's not going to be something you get to eat. So that, again, I'm not mentioning this to just out of sort of saying that everyone should live in this way, but how at that moment then you can see that sense of the mind saying, if I got given a banana, I would be happy. And then realizing, well, that's not really true. It's just, here is the habit of wanting something for me, or wanting this for me, or wanting a particular quality of comfort, or something that we like, and being able to watch that feeling arise, be there as it abides and passes, and as it passes away. So you're deliberately inviting those frictions. Luang Por Chah would say this is like deliberately and skillfully using friction and difficulty as a way to sharpen the quality of wisdom. And he would say things like, the Buddha Dhamma arises from difficulty. The more difficult, the better. Master Xuan Hua of the Northern Buddhist tradition here would say exactly the same thing. Buddha Dhamma arises from difficulty. The more difficult, the better. So in our culture, which looks towards convenience and comfort and personal control as being the kind of ideal of how we find happiness, it's really going in a very, very different direction. But the Buddha and the forest tradition teachers, then they're not advising this or spelling this out, and I'm not spelling this out as a way of just wanting to cause you more difficulty or harm, or out of a kind of malicious nastiness, or kind of wanting to cause people harm or difficulty, but rather, as Ajahn Chah put it, if you haven't got friction, the edge of your blade is going to get dull, and it loses its edge. It loses its sharpness. You need friction in order to keep the edge of your wisdom blade sharp and keen, and so that's I feel is a very good analogy. Those of you who've ever sharpened a knife or a chisel, or just in your kitchens, you got a sharpening stone, or some kind of way of keeping the edges of your kitchen knives very effective, and so they will cut through anything you want, your vegetables or your bread or whatever you want to cut in your kitchen. You need that friction to make that edge sharp and keen. So these the suffering that leads to the end of suffering is about that skillful use of abrasion, of friction, using those frustrations and difficulties, being with the people that you don't like, not getting the things that you would prefer, physical discomfort, physical illness, the pandemic not being over, more restrictions being put in place, more travel limitations being put in place. This is friction. So if the attitude towards that friction is skillful, it's like getting the grindstone moving at the right speed, getting the blade at the right angle, pressing with the right amount of pressure, then that's exactly what helps the edge of the knife to get really sharp and keen, and the edge of the blade is sharpened in the most effective and reliable and sustainable way. So I like to think, as I was mentioning, this is, you're approaching those very instinctual reactive areas of your brain, your mind, your feeling. So around sleep, around food, around personal possessions, personal space, so that and in terms of giving advice to the lay community, then I feel it's good to understand this sort of suffering that we can, the ordinary everyday sufferings. Maybe you feel you've got enough friction and difficulty in your life already. You don't need to be amplifying that. that he said, you don't know the people I live with already, Ajahn. You should hear my neighbors. I don't need to ask them to turn up the volume. That's already very challenging, very, very loud, very difficult. I leave those decisions to you to work out for yourselves. But the important thing is the conscious turning towards those experiences of difficulty and recognizing, oh, here's a loud noise from the neighbors. What's my mind doing with that? Does happiness depend on that noise stopping, or can the attitude towards that noise, can that be changed? Is it the noise annoying me, or is it me going out and annoying the sound? Where's the annoyance coming from, as Luang Por Chah would put it? So in terms of say, advice for you for lay community, the many of you who are gathered on this this teaching today, that to be looking at ways of simplifying your life, because the Dutanga practices, they're not harmful, when they're not physically damaging, and they're not designed to also create more difficulty and conflict between you and the people that you live with. With respect to these Dutanga practices, the Buddha said there's 5 reasons why you might engage in these as a monk or as a nun. So and the belief that you're burning off bad karma by carrying out these austerities. The second one is because everyone around you is doing it, so you feel you should do as well. The third one is to impress your teachers, because you think it will make you seem to be a good disciple. Then the fourth one is to impress the lay people, so they make lots of offerings to you. And then the fifth one, he said, is for the sake of simplicity. He said, of these 5, only the last one is worth following. The first 4, that they are not anything that's liberating. Don't follow those first 4. So the fifth one is about simplicity. And so you're both simplifying your life and then using the friction or difficulty that comes from that simplification very consciously and deliberately. So what I would suggest is, if you're looking to kind of sort of do tangas for the lay community, how to consciously using suffering as the way out of suffering, looking to declutter your living spaces. How many things do you have in your home, your living spaces, that you don't really need? I lived in America for a long time, and I'd never come across the idea of a storage facility before I went there. If there's a few Americans on this call, I think there are, they'll know that it's oftentimes when people in the States, they move to a new place, they put stuff into storage because they haven't got enough room in the new place. Some people have their possessions in 2 or 3 different storage units because they haven't got enough room in their home for all the things that they possess. I'm not trying to make fun of American people here, but it's a good example of how much stuff do we need. How much, even if you haven't got stuff in storage in a storage unit, how much is up in the attic or in boxes in the back room, piled up, and you haven't unpacked from the last move. Do you really need to keep them? How much stuff is around your living space? So a conscious, I like, what's her name? Marie Kondo, the kind of the Japanese declutterer. I think that's her name, I'm not sure. You can let me know in due course. But that simplifying your living situation, decluttering and sharing the extra things that you don't need with people who might be able to need them. Then also looking at the way that you schedule your time. How much of our day do we fill up with commitments and appointments? How much space do we leave for ourselves during the day? Do we say and give ourselves time just to be alone, to not be doing anything, to just give space to ourselves, to be kind of looking at and many and various ways that we can simplify also the way that we spend our time. Do we need to be entertained all the time? Can we be alone? Can we keep things simple? Can we say not be constantly seeking satisfaction through getting the new things? Can we be content with the things that we have? And so many years ago, in the 1950s and 60s, I think in Thailand, the government called together the senior ajahns in Thailand and said, you know, you've got to stop teaching about contentment. It's not good for the gross national product. So we want to forbid the teaching of contentment, santuti, as a practice. This is not helping the economy. So Ajahn Buddhadasa stepped up, was a very famous, and the Thai people on this talk will recognize his name. Ajahn Buddhadasa very courageously stepped up and said, do you think the Buddha was mistaken? Do you think he didn't understand where happiness and well-being comes from? Like, this is really foolish, you know, that if people use their use things wisely, then contentment is going to contribute to national well-being rather than go against it. You know, so he was very, very forthright, very outspoken, and ready to let people know his perspective. But you're saying, you know, contentment is a source of happiness. That's a quality of being unburdened, and to be, say, at ease with not trying to find happiness through getting more things and filling the spaces of our life. So I feel that's a quality that is our way of life, and in the world, in the East, in the West, all around the planet, there isn't a lot of encouragement towards contentment. We are called the consumer society, which is a really weird word, a really weird term. The consumer, like we're just one big mouth consuming, like a giant open mouth that's continually sort of consuming stuff. We don't need to be a consumer society. We could be a contentment society, and that and in that way we can learn to use the resources of the planet and in a much more skillful way. And also we find a lot more spaciousness and ease within the life that we have. So when we are ready to meet that those kind of qualities of suffering, irritation, fear, dissatisfaction, a kind of hunger for possessions, or for approval, or for or even meditation achievements, that we can be unconsciously feeding the sources, the causes of dukkha, of dissatisfaction in ourselves. And if we turn the attention around and we recognize this is the feeling of worry, this is the feeling of desiring, this is the feeling of irritation, it's like this is the way it is, and then opening the heart to that, then that feeling of difficulty arises, it does its thing, then it passes away, and then the experience is there is nothing missing. The heart is in tune with Dhamma, and how could there be anything missing from the Dhamma of the present reality? That there is nothing missing. It can't be. You know, the Dhamma, there's never anything lacking, never anything in excess in terms of Dhamma. So when the heart opens itself to dukkha and knows it just as a pattern of feeling here in the present, then when that pattern passes, and even while it's there, if it's known with wisdom, if it's really apprehended, really received, well, this is dukkha. This is the discomfort. This is hunger. This is being hot on a hot day. It's just like this. Then even while that experience is still there, there is space around it. There's a peacefulness in relationship to it. There's an ease. Even while the illness is there, or the difficulty is there, that peace and happiness is not dependent on that uncomfortable feeling coming to an end, but it's found right here in the attitude towards that uncomfortable feeling. So that this is where I would say liberation and the ending of suffering is truly found, is in the attitude that we have. And then we do what we can to make life so reasonably comfortable and effective. We don't go out of our way to cause ourselves illness or to cause ourselves injury, but just through, say, inclining towards simplicity, towards spaciousness, to be at ease and to be content without filling every corner of our days with activity, with entertainment and things to be doing, then we find there's a great peacefulness, even when surrounded by people, even surrounded by, in the midst of our work and our say, engaged lives. And in a mysterious way, this sense of opening the heart to dukkha and finding a spaciousness around it, it enables us to engage with the world, with our work and the people around us in a far more effective and complete way, that we are genuinely attuned to life in a more complete way, and so that it's rather than the ending of suffering being some kind of a kind of state that is apart from the world and engaging with people and things and activity. It's in the midst of the world that that genuine peace, that great spaciousness and ease can be found. So I see that the clock has gone round to 3 o'clock here in England, so probably 10 o'clock in Thailand and Malaysia. And so I'll draw it to a close there and then open things up for questions. I offer these thoughts for your consideration today.
May I invite Kun Orapan, Kun Pen, please unmute your video and please unmute your audio and turn on your video to ask the question.
นมัสการค่ะพระอาจารย์ค่ะ I like to talk about pain because recently I have a lot of pain, and I find like when the pain arises, it's so hard to stay to be even mindful. Like I sort of get absorbed into the pain. So I like to ask Pra Ajahn how to best handle the pain.
This is a very common question. I feel it's significant that the Buddha himself experienced chronic pain when he was an old man. If you're familiar with the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the discourse about the Buddha's last days, it begins by him saying, my body is like an old cart. You know, I'm 80 years old. It's like an old cart, an old wagon held together with strings and straps. Says the only way I can experience I can experience comfort is to completely absorb my mind into emptiness, into the sunyata vihara. So the Buddha experienced chronic pain, and quite a number of times, if you're familiar with the suttas, he says things to like, Sariputta, my back is paining me, but the assembly is still wide awake, so I'm going to go and rest my back. You go and you carry on giving a dhamma talk, because the community is still alert, and you know, there's still opportunity for sharing dhamma. So the Buddha was also experiencing chronic pain. Now, it's not a small statement. And at the beginning of that very, very significant sutta, it starts off with him saying, you know, I'm an old man. This body is old, like an old cart. So that just because he was fully enlightened and incapable of suffering, didn't mean that he didn't experience pain. So I think with respect to your question, Orapan, is teasing apart pain and suffering. They're two different things. And so in particular, the Buddha gave a teaching about this called the arrow, and he uses the image of a soldier on a battlefield. And he said that, so if you imagine a soldier on a battlefield shot with an arrow, so that arrow represents physical pain. If you're born, if you have a body and a mind, you're necessarily going to experience physical pain. That's unavoidable. Nobody can dodge the first arrow. The second arrow is the negotiating, resenting, waiting for it to be over, feeling this is unfair, why me, what can I do about this? A kind of worrying, resenting, fearing, negativity that clusters are around that feeling of dukkha. And so that, so the second arrow, that can be avoided. And when we talk about the ending of suffering in the Four Noble Truths, it's all about the second arrow. That's the dukkha that nirodhas. The pain of the body, that doesn't nirodha. I mean, it comes and goes, but when we talk about the ending of suffering, it's not the end of physical pain. So if that's what you were looking for, maybe a few of you want to sign off right now. That's not the kind of suffering that this teaching will end. The physical pain is still going to be there, but the attitude towards it is where we have, the mind has a degree of control. So the using of mindfulness and wisdom to turn the attention to that painful feeling, and to the degree possible to be relaxing both the body around that physical pain, and then relaxing the attitude towards it. So say, for example, the pain is in your back or in your neck. So I don't know where it might be, or just as a random example. So if the pain is in your back, you'll notice that the muscles around the painful area tend to tense up, and we tense up against the pain. We resent it and resist it. So if in the meditation you bring your attention to that area that's uncomfortable, and consciously relax the muscles as much as possible to soften that, to not go along with that reactive pattern of tensing up against the pain, but relaxing the muscles, and then relaxing the attitude to, okay, this is a feeling of pain. Right now it's like this. Is the mind waiting for it to be over? Is there a resentment? Is there a negativity? What's here? And so using that capacity of say, wisdom and wise reflection to shift the attitude, so that there can be essentially what you're using the meditation for is to guide the mind towards avoiding the second arrow, so that the painful feeling is still there, but the mind is not making it into a problem. It doesn't mean that you don't do appropriate exercises, or even that you don't take painkillers if they're necessary, but you're in each moment there is that attitude of acceptance. You're not pretending that you like it. It's not going to make it comfortable, but it's that sense of, well, whether I like it or not, here it is. And when there is that open-hearted attitude, then even though there's a painful feeling, there's peace with it. And again, I can speak from direct experience with this. It's kind of remarkable. You can be experiencing intense pain, but it's absolutely not a problem. And so that's what I would suggest, having that kind of a model in your mind, that pain is inescapable, but suffering is optional.
I try to do that, but I can only be successful for a very short period of time. And then after that, I kind of don't have, the mind doesn't have strength to carry on. So my question is that mean that my meditation or the strength of my mind is not enough?
Well, we do the best we can. The fact that it works even a little bit is good. Yeah, and so that Luang Por Chah said one of his most helpful teachings is that he said 50 to 70% of the practice is knowing that you should let go and not being able to. So that just because we know it's the right direction doesn't mean to say that we've arrived at our goal, right? So just because, like, if you're driving, if you're in Bangkok and you're driving to Ubon, or just because you know where Ubon is, you're heading in the right direction, you just haven't got there yet. It's still the right direction. You're still doing the right things, but it's still, there's more miles to go. Therefore, you haven't reached Ubon yet. So I think it's important to see these things in terms of how nature operates. So to me, that teaching of Luang Por Chah is so useful, because the thing that recognizes where the problem comes from is one part of our mind, and the thing that actually enables the mind, there to be a genuine letting go of it, that's another part of our mind. Where the attachment comes from one place, the letting go comes from somewhere else. If you see what I mean.
May I invite the next person, Shun Wai? You may ask, Ajahn.
Hello, Ajahn. Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm Michael. We all know how to deal with physical suffering, right? But when it comes to the mental, what if there is a great resentment or sadness that is so intense and unbearable? How should we deal with that kind of a mental suffering?
Well, it's I would say in a very similar way. I mean, like I was saying to Orapan, just clarifying what's happening. Like, this is the separating out the painful mental state from the waiting for it to be over, resenting where it's come from, blaming somebody else for it, blaming ourselves and hating ourselves for being the cause of it. You know, just seeing what the mind adds to it. So in exactly the same way, we can experience painful mental states, but and maybe another of the ways of working with it is to spell it out using the meditation to say, here is this painful feeling, and this is the feeling of resentment. I hate this. If this wasn't here, I would be happy. And that way of naming what your mind state is, it can be extremely helpful. Like, here is the experience of rage at my brother or my neighbor. I wish he didn't exist. If he was dead, I would be happy. I'm just making that up, you know. But, and so you're speaking the unspeakable, you know, very un-Buddhist statements. But it's the kind of practice Ajahn Sumedho would encourage, like giving voice to your sort of inner urges, not because you want to follow them, but because by spelling it out, then again you're contacting that intuitive wisdom that recognizes that the picture is bigger than that. The truth is beyond that. So that if you say, like with Orapan's experience of physical pain, that, okay, if this pain wasn't here, then I would be happy. And you can't even get to the end of the sentence before you realize, well, yes and no. You know, I'd find something else to be upset about, or yeah, that feeling, oh, this is going to be here forever. And then again, you get to the end of you can't get to the end of the sentence without realizing that's not quite true. That's not the whole picture. So similarly with emotions, like I'm never going to get over this resentment. Yeah. And then this kind of reflection is not just sort of in the flow of just your mental chatter. It's like very deliberately, ideally in meditation, bringing the mind to stillness and then noticing that emotion and saying, I hate that person. I'm always going to resent them until the end of time. Beyond the end of this universe, I will hate them. Definitely. And you know, you kind of make a statement like that, it's ridiculous. And it falls apart. Or if you were different, if she was different, I would be happy. And you know, it's a really helpful practice. Ajahn Sumedho would teach this a lot in the late 80s and early 90s here at Amaravati. And sometimes I find myself in the meditation hall just kind of chuckling, because these things that seem so solid, so real, if only I wasn't me, if I was just somebody else, everything would be great. If I was just different, if I just wasn't me, I would be happy. And when you spell it out, it loses its power. So it's in exactly that same way, getting it front center and then stating what the mind's attitude is that I'm going to be with this forever. It's never going to be over. And this is an absolute problem. You know, when you spell out what your fears are or your attachments, they lose their strength. It's like turning the lights up brightly, and then you kind of reveal how the trick is. It's like if you watched a film of a magician, a conjurer doing a trick, when you see it, the film slowed down, you can see how the trick is done. You turn the lights up bright, you slow it down, you see how the trick is done. So the trick doesn't work anymore. So this is exactly the same way. If I say, if you were different, I would be happy. And you know, it falls apart on its own. You don't have to let go of it because it collapses. And that's a very common experience. So also, you know, we can have painful mental states and not make a problem of it. Like again, using the example of the Lord Buddha, there's a very beautiful teaching where he says, he's sitting in a dhamma assembly, and he says, this assembly seems as though it's empty because Sariputta and Moggallana have now passed away. It was just shortly after Moggallana and Sariputta had died. He says it feels as though the assembly is empty. So here's the Buddha expressing the fact of feeling that even though there's hundreds of people present, it's like there's something missing because Sariputta and Moggallana have passed away. So he was feeling that sense of loss. He didn't make a problem out of it, but there's a comment, and it's there in the suttas. You know, it was recorded in the suttas that this is significant. The Buddha is feeling sadness at the absence of his dear companions. They're not there, but it's not a problem. So in terms of painful emotional states, regret about things that we've done in the past, conflicts, feelings of rage or resentment, jealousy, or desire. If only I had this, then I would be happy. You know, that we can be really convinced of those, but then when you catch what the habit is, the mind is caught into some kind of pattern, and you spell it out. So if I had this, if I got that promotion, I would be happy. And then you know, no, I wouldn't. You know, it's not a concept. It's like when you try on a pair of shoes, you don't have to think, oh, these ones fit or these ones don't fit. You know whether they fit or they don't fit before the words arise. It's a non-conceptual, non-verbal knowing. And so it's exactly the same way. When I've said, if only you were different, then I would be happy. If only I wasn't me, if I just had a different personality, everything would be great. Then when that's really brought front center and thought through, then I find I'm chuckling by the time I get to the end of the sentence. Its validity falls apart. It's only when it's sort of off in the edges, around the corners, you just can't quite see it. Then it seems solid and real. When you get it front center, it's like, really? That's it? That's it? And it loses its power, its strength. Or like if you're afraid of ghosts and you hear some kind of a rustling in the corner of the room, and the lights are off. Oh, what's that? What's that? What's that? You turn the light on, and it's just a gecko, you know, or a little lizard crawling across the wall. Oh, it's just a lizard. It's not a ghost coming to eat my liver, you know. Turn the lights on, and then the problem goes away. So this is turning the inner lights on. So another question, please.
Thank you. Next, Kunwara Anong.
Yes. Yep. I would like to ask that if this suffering can be measured in the level, and it can be compared between each people of this suffering level.
Can suffering, well, I would say there's different degrees, but it's very subjective, you know, that for someone who is spiritually very mature, say, that then they can still have this kind of, I assume you mean suffering as in the second arrow kind of suffering, that people will still experience suffering, but it will be it will manifest in different ways for different people. So I think that in his main teachings, the Buddha points out that it's according to the level of spiritual maturity then the degree of suffering gets less. But he doesn't go into sort of exact amounts, because that's pretty, that's what you call a subjective judgment, if you understand that kind of term. So one helpful example he gave, he said, it's called the sutta called the fingernail, and he reached down and scratched the ground in front of him and held up his finger and said, "What do you think, monks? What is greater in quantity, the amount of dirt under my fingernail or the great earth?" And they say, "Venerable Sir, the amount of dirt under your fingernail is very, very small. The size of the great earth is very, very large." And then the Buddha said, so too, the suffering that one who has not entered the stream can expect to experience is comparable to the size of the great earth. The suffering that one who has entered the stream, who has had that liberating insight, the suffering they can expect to experience is comparable to the dirt under my fingernail. So he does make comparisons sometimes, but it's fairly broad, what they call a broad brush description, not in any more kind of refined detail than that, I would say.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Apita Brown. Please unmute.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Amaro. Really appreciate this talk. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Yes.
Okay, all right, good. I think you may have answered the crux of my question when you were responding to Orphan. My question is, you talk about opening the heart to suffering, and I'd like for you to, sometimes it seems like just a concept rather than really understanding fully what you mean by opening the heart. And what I think I heard you say is more like acceptance, acceptance, being with and not getting caught up in our own storylines, maybe, about discomfort or illness or whatever it is that we're shutting off or pushing away or have fear about. Is that correct, or can you kindly elaborate on opening the heart to the suffering and being with the suffering? I need a bigger sense of what that is. Thank you.
Well, I feel you've described it very, very accurately. It's acceptance doesn't mean approval. You're not pretending that you like it or that you're glad that it's there. It's more that radical acceptance or recognition of here it is, whether I like it or not, or whether there's anything I can do about it or not. Here it in this moment, here it is. It's this way. And so that it's an attitudinal quality. And so then in terms of the practice, watching the mind sort of when it has those moments of radical acceptance. Now, I feel that loving kindness in its essence is exactly that radical acceptance. It's that open-heartedness of, well, in this moment, it's exactly this way. Doesn't mean that the action can't be taken to make things go in one direction or another, but in this moment, it's this way. And so that there's a letting go of that kind of self-centered thinking around it. There's a letting go of negotiation or resentment or attitudes of it's unfair, but just here it is. it's this way. And so that and that's one distinction that Luang Por Sumedho emphasized over and over, that acceptance doesn't mean approval. You're not trying to get to a place where you like physical pain. If you had a 3-day migraine, it's not likable. If you've got an injured leg and you've got a chronic, say, pain from a messed up hip joint that is there every waking moment, you can't like it, but you can not hate it. You can not dwell in aversion towards it. And so It also doesn't mean to say that you don't do various exercises or do treatments to alleviate it. You can mindfully follow all of that through, but still, moment by moment, it's this way. This is how it is. So that opening of the heart to it, it's not passivity. Acceptance doesn't meaning it doesn't mean switching off, because our capacity to act and just to make choices is also part of the way things are. And that sometimes when we talk about acceptance or letting go or non-attachment, it's very commonly misread as passivity or kind of just watch. But we can just watch ourselves taking action. We can just watch ourselves walking to the osteopath. We can just watch ourselves recognizing this treatment isn't working. Maybe it's a good idea to try something else. So that skillful action can be also based upon non-attachment and letting go. So I feel in terms of that open-heartedness, it's really important to recognize that it's not a kind of numbing or dissociation and abstracting, but rather it's a mistake. What's really what the middle way is, I would say, is it's a way of both non-identification or letting go of self-creation around what is experienced, combined with an attuning, so that the more that self-view and conceit is let go of, I'm feeling this is my problem, I've got to do, I should, I must, letting go of all of the I-making and mind-making, then that results in a more complete attunement. So that intuitive wisdom of try another osteopath, or no, right now nothing can be done about this, whatever might be the accurate intuitive response, that's much more clear, and one feels at home with that. So that kind of open-heartedness is not necessarily associated with doing or not doing, but whether it's right to take action or what to do arises from that attunement undistorted by self-view and self-concern. And it's a moment-by-moment practice. It's not just sort of something that we decide to do or be in one moment, then it just runs. It's like driving a car. It's a moment-by-moment quality of attention. I know they've got self-driving cars nowadays, but that aside, just it's a moment, but you can't just go on the road and let the car do its thing. You've got to pay attention moment by moment for where you're going, what the rest of the traffic is doing, especially big city driving. You've got to. It's a moment by moment practice, so that if you're feeling mental anguish or when's it's going to go away? If only I didn't have this feeling of sadness or grief or anger or jealousy, regret, or if only I didn't have this physical pain, then I would be fine. To catch that and say, oh, here is the mind saying, if only I didn't have this resentment, I would be fine. If only I didn't have this physical pain, I would be fine. That's what the mind is creating in this moment. That's what's here. So it's like a moment by moment receiving and holding of what the mind is doing with the present experience. So that parinyayanti, dukkha, is to be apprehended, to be understood. It's like, oh, here is the mind creating dukkha around this feeling. That's what's happening. So that it's like a moment by moment practice. It's not just a kind of an aspiration or an ideal, but it's a way that we work with our experience moment by moment, day by day.
Thank you very much. Thank you.